no one is supposed to live in here. No one is supposed to just spend extended periods of time in here. This is a public restroom. This is not a living space.
If you're Chris Gardner, you have no complaints. Gardner used to be homeless, and on rare occasions, he holed up in this public bathroom with his infant son.
It was a choice. You eat or you stay in the hotel. We chose to eat. We stayed in the subway station. We rode the trains. We slept in bathrooms. My mother was in prison twice. And it was one of those things that no one ever talked about.
And she was in prison because?
First time, allegedly receiving welfare while working. And the second time, she attempted to burn down the house that my stepfather was sleeping in. She wanted to kill him for beating her. And I can say honestly, I'm sorry she didn't succeed. My last Christmas at home, man, I was put out of the house, butt naked, at gunpoint. But I made a decision that I was going to be everything that this guy was not. I'm not going to drink, and I'm not going to beat women. I'm not going to be ignorant. And one of the tactics that I developed as a young kid, I would read, and I'd read out loud, and I would be saying to this guy, yeah, you can beat me down. You can beat me. You can beat my mom. You can put us out of here with a gun. But I can read, and I'm going places.
In one of the worst events of Gardner's childhood, an incident he never discussed, he was raped by a man who was a member of a gang of thieves in his neighborhood, and he had nowhere to turn.
I don't know how any rape victim survives something like that, but I believe if you talk to them, a lot of us do block it off. And at some point in time, I did have an encounter with that gentleman. I expressed myself another way.
You hit him with a cinder block.
I did. And walked away. And left the whole incident right there on the street.
What got Gardner out of his neighborhood was the Navy. After 4 years of duty, he was a kid without a college degree, but who valued reading and who learned quickly. He became a medical supply salesman in the San Francisco area, supporting a wife and a young son. But he reached another turning point in his life when, in a parking lot one day, he met a man who drove a red Ferrari.
And I asked him 2 questions that basically changed my life. What do you do, and how do you do that? Turns out this gentleman was a stockbroker who was making $80,000 a month.
That was all the motivation Gardner needed to start knocking on doors, applying to become a trainee at a brokerage, even though it meant he would have to leave his steady income job. Then things started to get bad. He was hauled off to jail for parking violations that he couldn't afford to pay. His wife left him. His subsistence income wasn't enough for him and his son. So when Gardner brought his son home from daycare each night to the cheap hotels he could occasionally afford, he got help from unexpected sources.
By the time we were coming home, the ladies of the evening were beginning their shift. And they would always see myself, this baby, and the stroller. They never saw a woman, so they kind of figured out something's going on. So they started giving them $5 bills. And if it were not for those ladies of the evening giving their child $5, there would be times I could not have fed him.
Occasionally, he found a place to stay here, in a nearby Bay Area rapid transit station, where he could bathe his son in the sink and lock the door when they needed time. He says they were some of the darkest days of his life, but his life was about to turn. Gardner swore he would never abandon his children. In return, he found a source of inspiration.
Giving my son a bath by candlelight. We had no electricity. I didn't know whether I was going to quit, crack, or cry. some kind of way this child picks up on it out of nowhere, and he says, Papa, you know what? You're a good papa. That was all I needed to go on.
The extraordinary trials that Gardner went through finally ended. With a broker's license, once the opportunity was his to seize, the success of this formerly homeless man was astonishing. He started with cold calls, was recruited by other firms, and eventually opened his own institutional brokerage firm in Chicago. Others found Gardner's story so compelling that after it was broadcast on 2020, actor and producer Will Smith developed a movie about Gardner called The Pursuit of Happiness. Gardner joined the project as a consultant, and as he returned to San Francisco, where his story had unfolded, Smith came along to observe and then to be Chris Gardner.
Chris represents the American dream, the beauty of America.
That's it. You still got a shot.
Yep, a little bit of the dark side.
still got a
There's
shot.
a dark side. There's definitely a dark side.
No question. I've seen both sides. I like this side over here.
No one is supposed to live in here. No one is supposed to just spend extended periods of time in here. This is a public restroom. This is not a living space. But were it not for this space, there were some days we would have had no place else to go. I mean, a lot of decisions, a lot of hard decisions were made right here about what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there?
Whatever new discoveries he's made about himself, the quote on the front of his book echoes the decision he made when he was still a child, silently promising how he would be different from the stepfather who terrorized him. I hold one thing dearer than all else, he wrote, my commitment to my son.
You're a stockbroker by profession. Are you surprised that your story has resonated with so many people?
I think my profession is totally secondary to my journey. It's not what I do, and what I do is not who I am.